Tonight's top story: how corporations successfully lobbied the government to poison you. You see, there's a group of chemicals known as PFAS chemicals, and they're a byproduct in the manufacturing of all sorts of things, from furniture to clothing to food packaging. So they're pretty much everywhere, including our drinking water, which is why, if you're watching this in America, there's a 98% chance that there's PFAS chemicals in your blood right now. So if your homework assignment was to contaminate everyone's blood with PFAS chemicals, well, I'd have to give you an A+ and tell you how proud of you I am. But I'd also have to give you an F- on being a decent person, because you just contaminated 98% of Americans with a toxic set of chemicals that are known to cause cancer, birth defects, and kidney disease. So I'd have to tell you how ashamed of you I am. So I guess I'd be pretty conflicted, but thankfully, dear viewer, you're not the one responsible for 98% of Americans having PFAS chemicals in their blood. No, that would be the PFAS manufacturers, so you're off the hook this time. But then again, so are the PFAS manufacturers, because the government doesn't regulate PFAS chemicals at all. Why does the government not regulate these toxic PFAS chemicals? Well, that's what we'll be taking a look at tonight.
This is Politically Explained.
With me, Cronker Watt. You see, over the past few years, there have been some in the government who have thought, hey, maybe that thing that's known to cause cancer and birth defects and kidney disease and liver disease and all those goodies, well, maybe that shouldn't be in our drinking water, and we should probably take it out of the environment in general. Go figure. And from 2019 to 2020, these goody two-shoe lawmakers who think we shouldn't be drinking poison, well, they introduced over 100 pieces of legislation that would have regulated PFAS chemicals in some form or fashion. But there was just one little problem. You see, those regulations would have meant that the PFAS manufacturers would have had to spend more money to clean up after themselves and to make sure that they don't get their toxic chemicals everywhere. But wait a minute, Tony, if the PFAS manufacturers aren't paying for the cleanup, then who is paying for the cleanup right now? Oh, my cameraman Tony just informed me that apparently it's us, the taxpayers. So, I guess these PFAS manufacturers aren't just poisoning us, they're also robbing us. Which actually reminds me of my ex-wife. Oh, I do miss her. Although, come to think of it, my last 3 wives all robbed and poisoned me at different points. I guess I have a type. But in any case, the corporations really didn't want to spend the money on not poisoning everyone. So just as lawmakers were hyping themselves up to actually do their job and unpoison everyone, well, the 7 largest PFAS manufacturers decided to drop a humongous $61 million to lobby the federal government. And in addition to lobbying, they also made key political donations to buy off politicians' votes. Take, for instance, a 2019 amendment in Congress, known as the PFAS Action of 2019. Now, that amendment would have classified the 2 most common type of PFAS chemicals as hazardous. That amendment passed the House, and it had bipartisan support in the Senate, but then it was filibustered by a Republican who stopped it from ever passing. Now, we don't know who exactly filed that filibuster, but what we do know is that many of the Republicans who opposed the PFAS Action of 2019 were receiving large donations from the PFAS industry. Like Senator Jen Inhofe of Oklahoma, who received $60,000 from PFAS manufacturers, which is a lot of money, but probably not so much money that I'd agree to poison everyone in the country, although I'm kind of a terrific person, so I understand that not just anyone can have that level of moral strength, you know? So I guess there's a reason why companies spend millions of dollars every year lobbying and donating to candidates. Who knew? Although, thankfully, we still have our non-political agencies to protect us and enforce the law. What? I'm being told apparently those are corrupt too. Oops. You see, back in 2018, the EPA tried to launch its own PFAS action plan, which would have designated some PFAS chemicals as hazardous, kind of like what Congress tried to do in 2019. But thanks to corporate lobbying of the EPA and interference from Trump appointees who had been in the PFAS industry for years, that action plan never really went anywhere. There's also the case of PFBS. Wait, Tony, did you fall asleep while typing this in the teleprompter? These are nonsense words. Oh, no, apparently he's awake. No, I guess scientists are just terrible at naming things. No, it turns out that PFBS is a PFAS alternative that was advertised as being, quote, practically non-toxic, which is actually what my second wife told me right before she handed me a very suspicious glass of wine that I definitely shouldn't have drunk. And much like that glass of wine that almost very nearly killed me, and certainly killed my marriage, it turns out that practically non-toxic is still pretty toxic, since PFBS has been linked with kidney disease and reproductive problems, which caused the EPA to create a PFBS toxicity assessment, which, much like those PFAS regulations, could have been pretty big trouble for the PFBS manufacturers, and it could have caused them to have to clean up after themselves and make sure that they don't get their sort of toxic chemicals everywhere. But thankfully for PFBS manufacturers, the report was changed last minute to be far less harsh. As one senior EPA scientist put it, the report was modified to reflect decisions that came out of the political administrators' meetings and represented an infringement of scientific integrity. So even scientific reports from non-political agencies like the EPA aren't free from the corrupting influence of corporate intervention. Also, if you're liking the episode so far, maybe consider sharing it with your friends. Say something light, like, hey, fun fact, did you know that you almost certainly have toxic chemicals in your blood? Something like that. You should also subscribe. We have a new episode every week. Also, let us know in the comments which is your favorite way that corporations control the government. Is it A, direct lobbying, B, political donations, or C, industry insiders getting key political appointments to government agencies that are a clear conflict of interest? Okay, I'll let you know my favorite down below. But I suppose that the real lesson in all of this is that it's actually very lucky that my second wife put rat poison in my wine, because if she hadn't, I wouldn't have built up the immunity necessary to survive the time that my third wife tried to poison me, because she used substantially more rat poison. Alright, I hope you take that lesson to heart. I think it's an important one to learn. I'll see you next week. What? Oh, apparently it's not the real lesson. But no, apparently the real lesson is that corporations will lobby the government to blatantly do things that are against the public interest in order to protect their own short-term profits. And as a result, 98% of Americans now have a harmful set of chemicals in their blood, which are known to cause cancer, organ damage, and birth defects. But hey, at least a handful of executives made a humongous sum of cash along the way, so maybe it was worth it, Now, there's some promise that the Biden administration will take PFAS chemicals more seriously and finally start to regulate them, but that's just one battle. And whether it's PFAS chemicals or tobacco or global warming, corporate lobbying and corporate donations and appointment of industry insiders to key political positions always make it an upward battle to do what's actually best for the public interest instead of the interest of a handful of super wealthy executives and investors. Alright, that's the end of the episode. If you liked it, maybe check out our other episode about the American water crisis, where we also talk about PFAS chemicals, and the fact that a recent study found that 98% of tap water sampled had lead in them. And even reliving some of the less than stellar moments of my past relationships, I still managed to totally nail this one. I really am amazing. And Tony, I guess my therapist was right. I guess my past relationships really were toxic.